The image of a woman punching a man in the face is so common in films and television that it's become something we just accept. Society generally sides with the view that men commit most of the violence against women. There's no accounting for female on female violence, female on male violence, or even male on male violence. Now, to be clear, this is absolutely not discounting genuine violence against women. It's just posing an important question. Are men really more violent than women? My name is Erin Pizzey, and you're watching The Rational Female. If you enjoy my content, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel. When I was 14, a girl punched me in the face one day after school. It was at the bus stop in front of a bunch of people. She was making fun of my friend, so I wound her up, and she retaliated by punching me. I stood and stared directly at her as she and her friends got on the bus home. When I was in hospital 2 years ago for psychosis, one of the other female patients punched me in the face, and another one kicked me in the genitals. I didn't tell any of the staff this. No man has ever been physically violent towards me, but I have experienced sexual abuse from a male partner. I definitely think that society views men as far worse and more dangerous than the way we view women. I actually have a published novel that is about a young girl who witnesses her father beating up her mother. I have another novel that contains a story about an incredibly violent female psychopath. I really didn't think too much about politics when writing these stories. I just wanted to write compelling dramas. I have been very influenced by the British TV show EastEnders, which I loved as a teenager. This show definitely has a strong cast of male and female villains. One of the most iconic female villains for me was Janine Butcher. I saw so many females slapping men in the face in various shows and movies growing up, and I always wondered why it was played for laughs. Kat Slater frequently slaps her husband Alfie in the face. I have never understood why it's socially acceptable for a woman to hit a man, but if a man hits a woman, it's seen as a big deal. There's something seriously wrong with this normalization of female violence. In Sex and the City, there is a scene where Big accidentally knocks Carrie out of bed and she punches him on the nose. It's played off as an accident and there is remorse on her part, but no severe condemnation. It's just forgotten about. In the last episode of the show, Alexander Petrovsky accidentally slaps Carrie in the face. She tells Big, and he makes a big deal about it. I think that in general, we are more sympathetic towards female victims of violence as opposed to male victims of violence. Sexual assault against male prisoners is a massive problem that society rarely, if ever, talks about. The show Oz definitely delves into this, as do films like The Shawshank Redemption and American History X. Why do we only ever talk about violence against women, but seldom violence against men? The most controversial study of domestic violence perpetrated by women was the paper published in 1979 by Gels and Strauss. They conducted a national survey of over 2,000 intact American families and found that roughly 11.6% of men and 12% of women had experienced intimate partner violence over the past year. The Home Office research study of 1995, conducted in the UK, found that there were 6.6 million incidents of domestic violence in 1995. 4.2% of women and 4.2% of men had been physically assaulted within the past year that this study took place. More women were physically injured than men overall. Women were also more likely to view what happened to them as a crime compared to men. 99% of the incidents of violence against women were committed by men, and 95% of the incidents of violence against men were committed by women. Many people may naturally assume that the women were largely acting in self-defense. Studies have produced mixed findings on self-defense, with some finding similar reporting rates between the sexes, while others find that women report it more often. The general consensus seems to be that men and women equally perpetuate physical and psychological aggression. However, women are more likely to report being abused, more likely to be physically injured, and men are also more likely to perpetrate sexual violence and stalking. Women are more likely to self-report fear and self-defense as a motivation, while men are more likely to report control as a motivation. As mentioned above, self-defense seems to roughly be reported similarly. I read quite a few studies on this and tried to paint an overall picture of what is going on. It's safe to say that because men are typically more physically stronger and larger than women, it's easier for a man to physically injure a woman than it is for a woman to physically injure a man. Nonetheless, violence against men is something we should be taking just as seriously as we take violence against women. Erin Pizzey set up the world's first domestic violence shelter in modern history. She discovered that there were as many violent women as there were violent men. Eventum Legal is an all-female law firm based in the UK that exclusively focuses on domestic violence and sexual offense allegations. Most of their clients are male. I have read that lesbians disproportionately report experiencing the highest levels of domestic abuse. One study I have read found that bisexual women reported the highest levels of 61.1%, lesbian women reported the second highest levels with 43.8%, and homosexual men actually reported the lowest levels with 26%. This was in terms of lifetime prevalence. When considering severe violence, bisexual women still reported the highest rates of 49.3%, lesbian women the second highest at 29.4%, and heterosexual men the lowest at 13.9%. 1 in 4 lesbians and bisexual women have experienced domestic abuse in a relationship. 2/3 of those say that the perpetrator was a woman, and 1/3 said that it's a man. 62% of lesbians and bisexual women who have experienced domestic abuse from a female partner have experienced some form of physical violence. Now, I did find that for bisexual women, 90% reported having only male perpetrators. The 2/3 figure actually only applies to lesbians. It seems they have been placed into the same category on the Stonewall website. I have found one study that says in non-reciprocally violent relationships, women were the perpetrators in more than 70% of the cases. This was from the US. Again, men are more likely to inflict injury. The study also says that 1.5 million women and 835,000 men are physically or sexually assaulted by a partner in the US every year. One university study found that 32% of women physically assaulted their dates, compared with 24% of men. The Duluth Model was created in 1981 by Ellen Pence as a coordinated intervention against domestic violence. It uses feminist framing to claim that men largely commit violence against women to exert power and control. The Duluth Model has been criticized by numerous academics for being overly gendered and for failing to account for female perpetrators, same-sex abuse, and bidirectional violence. Generally, based on everything I have read, women are more likely to be victims of sexual violence, while men are more likely to be victims of every other crime, including homicide. Women are more likely to be killed by someone they know, and men are more likely to be killed by a stranger. Men make up roughly 80% of all global homicide victims. If we look at everything across the board, it seems to be that homicide and non-fatal assault mostly affects men, sexual violence and domestic homicide mostly affects women, and minor reciprocal partner violence is roughly equal. Generally, people are less likely to accept violence against women compared with violence against men. We tend to have an inbuilt bias towards female victims compared with male victims. I definitely think that things are changing considering all of the information I was able to find and compile for this video. All relevant studies are cited in the description box. The evidence paints a far more complicated picture than the common assumption that violence is simply something that men due to women. Different forms of violence show different gender patterns, and violence against men and violence committed by women deserve far more attention than they currently receive. Absolutely none of this is being said to negate violence against women. It just means that perhaps it might be more useful to look at this all as violence against people, not just women. Do let me know your thoughts on this below. For regular essays critiquing feminism, follow my Rational Female Substack. Link is available here or in the description below. To support the channel further, consider buying me a coffee via this link. Your support really helps me out a lot.